Okay, go ahead.
All right, so we'll get started. We are being recorded because there were people who couldn't come, who we know are interested. So there's you guys here who are here to learn, and then students who are not here tonight, but we'll see this later. For those of you who I don't know, I'm Rona Buckhalter. I'm the director of the Fellowships Office at Drexel. And we work with students who are interested in applying for nationally competitive awards of different kinds. So, we spend a lot of time with Fulbright, with NSF, but we also work with students who are interested in applying for what are sort of broadly known as these UK scholarships, that is Rhodes, Marshall, Mitchell, Gates, Cambridge. And what we realized is as we start to talk to people about that, that's a lot of the students don't really have much of a sense of how universities work in the UK, both for study abroad as undergraduates, but then for students who are graduating and thinking about going to the UK for graduate school, not really understanding what's similar, what's different about various graduate institutions and the approach that they take in the UK to education. So we decided to convene this panel, and if you guys could just introduce yourselves and maybe say, what department you're in, and also how you came to the institution that you went to or are still in the UK, and how you got here.
Okay, well, I'm Sean. I'm actually an undergraduate from the University of Leeds. I'm actually just studying here for a year on an exchange program. So so this is my third year of my undergraduate degree. So then I have my master's year, and then I graduate in the summer of 2013.
Okay, so I'm Simon Foucault from the Maths department. I'm a professor there. I spent 5 years in England doing my part 3 of mathematical tripos in Cambridge for 1 year, and then the PhD for 4. I spent around 5 years in total, and then before coming here, I spent some time in Nashville, Tennessee, back in France.
I'm Mary Ebling. I'm a professor of sociology in the Department of Culture and Communication. And I got my PhD at the University of Surrey, which is just south of London, and I spent 4 years in the UK, and I was able to do that. I can explain further. It was a little convoluted, but basically I had an EU studentship to work with Nigel Gilbert, who was a professor in the department. So he was my supervisor for my PhD, and that's how I ended up at Surrey.
My name is Jeff Schaefer. I'm a senior here at Drexel, business administration student. I actually did 2 separate study abroad programs in the UK. The first one was in the spring of 2009. I did the Drexel in London program that you can find more about just through the study abroad office here at Drexel. And just past fall, I did the Aston exchange program in Birmingham, UK. So pretty much that's been my experience there. I got a chance to, do 2 study abroad, so it's been, I had a quite interesting experience over there both times. So.
All right, so Jeff, why don't you start off talking about so as a student here, right, so you probably have the most similar experience to the students who are listening. What differences struck you? What did you notice that was different about the way education is approached there?
Well, I guess first thing that I'll say is just really how you are assessed with the examination. When I was at Aston, pretty much our assessment came down to, for most of my classes that I was in, came down to 1 exam at the end of the term. So, you're doing all this work, and then, really it's a lot of pressure. I felt like it was a lot of pressure, because of the way that we were assessed, all of the stuff that you're doing, and it just comes down to that 1 exam. But what I also noticed is that there is a lot of, my experience was there is a lot of focus on group work. And just projects that you work, the collaborative projects that you work together with teammates, other people from your courses and things like that. So pretty much, I would say just the course, just the way that you work together in teams, and just the way that you're assessed comes down to just that focus at the end of the term. More so when you're here at Drexel, you're going to have midterms. You may have 2 or 3 exams throughout the entire term. So I would say that was pretty much one of the biggest differences.
All right, so Sean, how about you on the undergraduate side? Coming from the other direction?
Having midterms was a shock. Like, didn't have to do them at all. Sorry, what was your name? Jeff. Like Jeff said, we at Leeds we tend to have maybe 3-4 maybe separate homeworks for class, and they're spread throughout the year or the term, and then there's a massive final exam at the end, which is maybe worth 80-90% of the entire grade for that class. So yeah, it's very exam heavy at the end.
And can you say something about the undergraduate degree in the UK? Does it sort of represent the same thing?
I think undergraduate degrees tend to be shorter in the UK than they do here. Here in Drexel, it's usually 4 to 5 years, whereas mostly you'll find it's 3 years. Or then if you do a master's like I am, then it's 4. But yeah, and of course we don't really. It's very rare that we have things like co-op and like that. So usually, if you were to have an internship, you sort it out yourself in the summer or something when you have free time. So I think a lot of it is you kind of have to make your own way, as it were. I think you're quite, there's a lot of help here for getting careers or helping you towards your career. Whereas I think in the UK you kind of have to take more of that initiative yourself.
I think Drexel's at an extreme even within the US.
Oh, maybe, yeah.
And that the professional development is kind of part of the program, which is, I think, in itself a little unusual.
I mean, we have careers fairs sometimes, but they're kind of more than not very many of them are department based, like civil engineering or chemical engineering or anything. There's just usually one massive one, in the university student building or something, and you just go along hoping there's something that's applicable. But otherwise, I mean, of course, you can talk to your advisors and that, and they will help you on your way to trying to find placements and stuff, or internships. But like I said, yeah, I think definitely compared to Drexel, it's a lot more self-led.
And is it common for undergraduates or bachelor students to also be getting masters?
Like me, if you do an engineering course, then yeah, it's quite common that you'll just do a master's. I mean, of course, you can drop out after 3 years and just get a bachelor's, but it doesn't get you as far.
Do you take your master's classes while you're taking your undergraduate classes, or is it 3 years?
It's kind of well, we just like I said, we have 3 years, and then we have our master's year, which is kind of just it's like the previous 3 years were more kind of general, and then you kind of specify. I'm architectural engineering, so in my 4th year, I'll probably go into more architectural studio based stuff, rather than structural or fluids or anything like that. But yeah, a lot of it, it's not too different, doing masters and doing bachelors. It's just longer.
And is your master's what we call it, a taught master's?
Sorry,
is there a taught degree and a research degree?
Oh no, it's taught.
It's all,
yeah. If you were to do postgrad or PhD, then it's mostly self-taught. But no, masters is usually just taught, the same as bachelors.
And staying on the undergraduate experience for just a minute, Jeff, did you notice a difference in, apart from the exams, in classes and how information was delivered, or the role of the instructor, professor?
For the classes that I took, I guess one thing that I'll say that I noticed was different. Like there were some, the courses that I was taking was broken down. They were called modules. And some of them I actually didn't have to, like I'm used to meeting at the same time, you know, every week. Say if I have a four credit class here at Drexel, you know, I'm going to meet, you know, every week that same day, or a 2 credit class, you know, may be broken down in like a Tuesday, Thursday, Monday, Wednesday category. But while I was at Aston, I noticed that some of the classes were spread out, whereas we may meet in week 2 and then we may not meet again until week 4, week 5. So there was a lot more, it was a lot more independent in that aspect. But for some of my larger lecture classes, I would say that the method of instruction was pretty similar to what you would receive here at Drexel. You know, you have large lecture classes. You have the instructor lecturing you from up front, and you're just pretty much sitting there listening, taking notes. So I would say from that aspect, the large lecture classes were pretty much the same style. It was just the smaller classes that were more independent, and it was more independent, meant less frequently.
All right, so on the graduate student side, how different is the experience of being a graduate student in the UK versus here?
Who are you asking this question? Who are you asking this question?
Either one of you.
Yeah.
You want to answer that? Maybe because I
Sure,
wasn't
and then you can
graduate
kind of
student.
add, yeah, I was a master's, I have a master's from Northwestern.
You do?
Yeah, from Medill.
Oh,
Yeah.
I went there also.
Oh, okay, we'll have to talk about Evanston. I think the big difference, there are a couple of differences. I can speak more to the PhD side of things than, you know, if you went for a master's level degree. So I think the big difference with getting a PhD in the UK is that you don't take coursework. It's basically you're there alone, doing your own research. You have to be very clear about what your dissertation is going to be about, or somewhat clear. And I think that was one of the biggest differences. And you basically, you know, with my situation, I applied for a studentship, and so I kind of was applying for the studentship rather than to work with this one brilliant man, Nigel Gilbert. So it was a studentship through the EU, through their what they call they have frameworks every year, and this was the 5th framework. And it was to do research on online journalism. So that was kind of why I took the studentship, and then I fortunately got to work with Nigel Gilbert. And so basically, you have this kind of really intense relationship with your advisor, with your PhD advisor. But I was also told from the very beginning that I'm the expert, that he wasn't the expert on the topic that I was researching, and that you're kind of expected to be producing kind of new knowledge through your PhD research. So I think that is also true here in the US, but usually the US, it's a minimum of 6 years. You do 3 years, 2 to 3 years of coursework, depending on the degree that you're getting, at least in the social sciences. This is how it works. And then if the culture of certain universities and certain students that go to certain universities in the US, I mean, you know, you do hear about PhD students working, you know, ABD for 12 years and things like that. That would never be allowed in the UK. I mean, the minimum or the kind of cutoff is 3 years. You can kind of push it to 4 years, but definitely they start kind of pushing you, like, you need to finish. Mhm.
So did you have to have your master's before you are eligible to pursue a PhD?
No. In this case, I didn't need to have my my master's ahead of time. Basically what happened was after my first year, I basically had to submit, so there were no qualifying exams or anything like that. And the other thing is that, you know, even though I had a master's in journalism, I was getting a PhD in sociology. Nigel would recommend, but he never forced me, and so I didn't take certain classes if I didn't want to. But he would recommend, oh, you know, if you're gonna have a sociology PhD, and you should, you know, sit in on this class, like stats or something like that. I didn't want to, but there were other ones that I wanted to sit in on, so I did do that.
And it was entirely up to you.
It was totally
which
up to
ones you
me.
did.
Yeah, I was in charge of the direction of all of my work. He was there basically to kind of guide me and to, you know, prod me if I needed prodding, things like that. But you asked again.
If you
sorry.
needed a master's to be.
Oh yeah, so
certified.
so basically after my first year I had to submit basically my literature review, so a chapter of my dissertation, which was examined internally by two other professors in sociology within the department. And if I had passed, that was kind of basically considered my passing the master's. And then at my defense, it's very possible, I mean, this is one of the ways it can go at a defense, because you go into the defense not knowing if you've passed. And so you can be given a master's degree and not a PhD based on how the defense goes. Thank God that didn't happen, and we can talk more about how the defense goes, at least, and it might be different at Cambridge, I don't know.
So was your
I think it's very
advisor
different.
on your part of your defense, or was it all outside people?
No, oh my God.
That's what I thought.
No, I mean, I've told my American friends about like what the defense is like in the UK, and basically it's like a gang initiation. They beat you up. And so I actually had two advisors. One was a junior advisor, and they could sit in the room, but they could not say anything. They silently observed. And I had an external reviewer, this guy, Frank Webster, who's like the granddaddy of a certain field of sociology in the UK, who was my external reviewer. And then we had an internal reviewer, Christine Hine, who was in the department. And then we had kind of like a mediator, someone who basically kind of kept time, who was also from the department. It was basically down to those two people deciding whether or not I would pass or fail. That was it. Yeah.
Without an advocate in the room.
Well, a silent advocate, you know, kind of like, you know, like kind of feeling the punches.
And so at Cambridge, does that process work differently?
Slightly, but first I would just confirm the two main points that you have made, that the PhD is research-based, you don't have any classes that you're required to sit in, and it's much shorter, 3 years, ideally can be extended to 4, but 3 or 4 usually, so much faster, and then it can be much faster because you don't need to take those classes. So about the PhD and the PhD defense and do you need a master, so everything is slightly different in Cambridge and Oxford, and even there between different departments they have different rules. So the way they selected PhD students, they usually don't want PhD students that come from abroad without knowing them really, so they ask them to take a year of this time coursework with a heavy examination at the end, and depending on that they will tell you if you accepted or not. And they ask for very good results.
So in other words, they don't just want you to have a master's, they want you to get a master's there first so that they can kind of get to know you.
Yeah, because and even if you get the masters there, but without a good enough grade,
Right.
they won't accept. So the last point was the PhD defense. Yeah, that was for me also just an internal and an external. My advisor was not in the room, so it was just the three of us. And this, it was not stressful at all. In my
It could be
no.
the culture of sociology, because
Yeah,
I've heard that
and-
it's quite normal.
And even in mathematics, it depends on the experience of different people. So I know that sometimes it lasts for 5-6 hours, and then in other cases, in my case, it was 40 minutes. So yes.
So you say at Cambridge they made you kind of get a master's there before
Not
you,
always, but yeah.
not always,
like-
but if you would to, I guess, I don't want to say fail your PhD defense, but you already went through the classwork, but they just give you a second master's, or so?
Well, they give you it's a different course, so it's really a master for 1 year before. And here I'm talking about mathematics. I'm not sure about the other fields, but before you go into the PhD, they want you ideally to have passed the part 3 of mathematical tripos. So it's something that's very specific to Cambridge. They're trying now to call it masters, but it's not. Well, historically it's not. And then you have, after that year, you already have that.
Okay.
So it's not at the end, if you fail, they give you a master, you have your master already. In the end, well, it doesn't happen often that you fail, because they would let you know beforehand that there's also a first year report or something of some kind to tell you that, well, if you're not doing well enough, you're not going to do the 3 or 4 years, and then they will tell you, no, sorry,
Okay.
we've got nothing for you.
That's good.
So while we're there, we're here to talk about the UK, but do you want to make any comment about how it's different in France?
So yeah, I have this, when you mentioned the main difference between the US and the UK is that you have only one exam in the end. I would say this is not a specificity of the UK but of the US, because in France it's the same. I would say in any European countries that's the way you're being assessed, and that you have to get used to that if you're going to study in England or in Europe. That it's not going to be exactly the same as here, because you're taking the exam at the end, and no excuse if you're sick on that day or something like that. You just have to live with it. Yeah, in France it's similar.
Well,
in Europe it's similar.
obviously you've got like a terminal illness or something, I think they'll like let you, or like there's like death in the family or something, then they'll let you like postpone it maybe, but
Yeah, take it again next year.
they usually. One thing I would say just here, like the taking of exams, seems to be really, really informal compared to what I'm used to.
Mm.
Like in Leeds, we are like all taken to like a massive hall. We sit in strict rows, and there's very little allowed on your desk. Like no pencil cases, no coats, no bags, no drinks bottles with labels on, no calculator, no calculators with the cover on, because basically anything you can write on, they make you get rid of. So it's really, really strict.
And to add to that, I forgot about this. The exams, you take them like anonymously. So like you can't, like they give you a student ID number. You have to put both your student ID number. But if you put, you can't put your name or anything like that. So here, at Drexel, you can put your name. It's not done anonymously. But if it's very formal to the point that if you do it incorrectly, you could pretty much sabotage your entire exam. Just by not following directions. So it's very important to follow directions.
And as an undergrad, I know like with the master's programs, a lot of times your exams and your papers would be sent to, another professor at another university to be kind of checked. Is that true for undergraduate?
Sometimes.
Yeah, they're
Yeah.
like I know for like our final grades, they were preliminary, and because they had to go to the review board and get reviewed
Right.
to get that secondary review before they were final. But they told us that most of the time, if there is a change, it's usually in your favor. So, but yeah, there is a preliminary review.
Right.
We have, I mean, the preliminary stuff, like we've had that since like high school, like your GCSEs when you were 16, like you got given preliminary results, but then they got checked again, then you got given the actual results, so it's like something we've had since high school.
But can I just add to that, because I also studied in the UK a million years ago, because my field was humanities and social sciences, we didn't take final exams the way you were describing it,
Oh,
but
really?
we had to write final papers. So, you know,
Oh
it's
yeah, we
not
have
always.
dissertations as well,
Right.
but like for me, my next year is going to be a mix of project, dissertation, and exams.
Mhm. Yeah. So anyways, just to add to that, it's not always where you have to go to a lecture hall and sit and take an exam. It depends on the class. Sometimes it's a take-home paper or 15 pages or whatever. So.
Thinking about doing a research degree, a PhD, it sounds very isolated. When I think back, when I think about my graduate experience in a doctoral program in the US, it was very social. We had, it was a lot about your peers and your colleagues. What was that like to be a doctoral student in another country?
Well, for me personally, research was not that isolated. I was seeing my supervisor every day. Didn't talk about work all the time because he was giving me some freedom as well. So he was trying not to get too involved, and because he considered that this was my work and then we shouldn't have too much interaction. But I was seeing him every day. By the way, he was Russian as well, so it's like none of us were really English at the time in Cambridge. And then, what was the second part of the question?
Oh, just about peers, colleagues.
Yeah, I mean, it's not that solitary. I don't think so. I mean, it's not my experience.
Mary?
I had a slightly different experience. I found it very difficult, like the first 2 years on the program. I was a little baffled by British culture, to be honest with you. Nigel Gilbert he's British, but he definitely had a research center where he endeavored over and over again to bring in international people all the time. So that was really nice, but because I wasn't doing, my work was actually not, he does social simulation, which is artificial intelligence and like this kind of computing work in the social sciences that I was not doing. So in that regard, I didn't really feel like I had a cohort with the other people that were in his research center. So I had to work really hard to actually, among the other PhD students, to kind of build a community, which I eventually did, but it wasn't, a lot of, because of the department, everyone was working on their own PhD in very different areas, and there was no kind of shared experience really that we all shared kind of together. So I think that was the big difference that I see compared to people who are doing a dissertation in the US, because they're all they come in as a cohort, they take the same classes at the same time. So.
Do any of you notice any differences in how Americans versus, British people spend their free time when they're students, either as undergraduates or graduate students?
Well, as you know, our drinking age is 18, not 21. So, yeah, I'd say one thing I've noticed is that people here are definitely more kind of, they're really like study focused, like got to study. Whereas in Britain, I find most people, like, if they get some free time, it's like, oh, let's go to the pub, let's go have a drink or something. But so I think there is a bigger drinking culture there, and I think one thing I've noticed in terms of the work is that here the work seems easier, but there's more of it. So that's why you guys are all like studying all the time. Whereas we, like I say, we just have one final exam and then bits of coursework here and there. So like we're not always working. So I think we do have a sense of more free time. Definitely, I mean, obviously, definitely compared to Drexel. I think I'm not sure if it's the same for every other university here, but that's definitely what I experienced.
I mean, yeah, I guess I would second the pub culture is very big in the in the UK. From my personal experience, when I was in Birmingham, I did have a lot more free time while I was over there, but that was partly due to the fact that while I'm here at Drexel, I'm involved in a lot of extracurricular activities. You know, I'm like on the board of different clubs and things like that, and I wasn't in that same capacity, you know, while I was studying abroad. So that was definitely one of the reasons why I had a lot more free time. I was still involved in different organizations, but obviously I wasn't, you know, leading those organizations due to the short duration that I was over there. But I definitely did have more free time while I was over there because of that. So I got a chance to do things like I normally wouldn't do. Like I got a chance to train and run a half marathon while I was over there. So that's, you know, how I try to use my free time, because and sports are very big, you know, as well, and especially football. Football is really big. So like people would utilize their free time to play, you know, football, you know, basketball, things like that. So.
That was no offense to anyone in the room, but that was the big baffling thing for me about British culture, was the pub culture, where, you know, you couldn't have people over to your house, you couldn't like go out for dinner. I had to learn that at 5 o'clock, if I wanted to socialize, I had to be down at the student pub.
That's not always the case. Like
it could have been just Surrey, I don't know.
No, like don't get me wrong, we do have a lot of like, you know, like just chill at each other's houses and that, or dorms if you're in first year or whatever. But yeah, I would say there is more kind of like a lot of like I'm part of a few like groups, like student groups as well, and a lot of the ways that they like tend to get people to socialise is by having a pub meeting.
Right.
So, because they feel like it's, you know, it's an environment where everyone can just like chill, relax, have a drink, get to know everyone. So it's kind of the ideal setting, I guess, in that sense.
Yeah, and it's definitely, I mean, I think once I learned that, and I also learned that I didn't have to try to keep up with my British friends in terms of like the pints, because I couldn't, you know, that I could just have, you know, like a soft drink and still socialize. Yeah, things kind of changed for me. But I think another big difference, and I don't know if you found this to be the case, or even you, the big difference that was kind of shocking to my advisor was that students don't work in the UK, and you're not expected to work.
You mean
like a part-time job
for wages? Yeah.
Oh, no,
definitely not. And so definitely my supervisor's eyebrows went up when I said, well, I don't know, my studentship was £7,000 a year, and students are expected to live in poverty, like absolute poverty, in the UK, which is fine. I mean, actually, there are a lot of kind of social safety nets in the UK that you can actually be quite comfortable with such low kind of studentship. But it was a little hard for me because Guildford is actually very expensive, and the other thing for older students is that, you know, like if you try to call to find a place to rent, they won't rent to students. So, you know, like and there are many reasons for that. So, you know, like finding housing that I could afford and everything, I actually had to do some part-time work, and it was definitely considered, you know, not something really I should be doing, but I had to in order to be able to, I found a place that would rent to me. But, you know, in order to be able to afford to, you know, support yourself, you have to do it. And I think that's, you know, I mean, I'm teaching here, and, you know, I'm still shocked with my students. No one's ever taken any classes with me, so I don't know what your situation is. But, you know, a lot of my students have 2 part-time jobs that equal 40 hours a week, plus they're going to school full-time. And I don't know how American students do it, and sometimes it really breaks my heart, and I wish we had a culture where students, your job is to study. Your job is not to, you know, and there we can, you know.
We have, I don't know if it's different for PhD
Yeah.
students, but we have Student Finance England, which gives us a loan every year. I mean, we have to pay back eventually, but they give us tuition fee loans, which cover all the tuition,
Yeah.
and then they give us a maintenance loan, which covers like housing and everything else. And if you are poor, like if your family is poorer, or like say if you're living with a single parent or something, you get also a thing called a maintenance grant, which you don't have to pay back. And so the lower your family's income, the more of this grant you get. So like, I have friends with opposite ends of the scale. One of them like lives with his like single parent, his mum, and she doesn't earn a lot, and he gets like an extra £2,000 a year or something, or £3,000. And then, but then of course you have the upper end of the scale where, like one of my friend's parents, he earns like 100 grand a year, so he gets no maintenance grant whatsoever.
And is there a lot of variation in tuitions across England, or is it pretty?
Usually, well, when I started, usually it's like a set rate amongst all universities, like even like Oxford and Cambridge is the same flat rate. And for when I started, it was about £3,000 a year. Now David Cameron's in charge. He's raised it to £9,000 a year, starting this September. But because I started before this came about, I still only have to pay like 3,000 something. But my brother, who's starting in September, has to pay 9,000.
But compared to US.
Well, yeah, compared to US,
Yeah.
it's like less than a third.
It's a good bargain.
Is that the same still for the PhD program?
PhD, yeah, it was a flat rate across the university system in the UK. So when I was there, because I was an overseas student, so anyone overseas, like so not an EU citizen or a UK citizen, and it was £9,000 a year. That was completely covered by my studentship. And the thing about the, so I didn't pay any tuition, and then in addition I had this kind of like this maintenance kind
Yeah.
of per year, this £7,000, which I supplemented by doing some research assistant work. I did some teaching, which you can do, you know, at
Those are just
a higher
available
level.
to departments and things like that?
Sorry?
Those are just available?
Yeah,
department-
within the
basis.
department. And then I found some, because I have a journalism background, so I found some kind of freelance writing for town council of all places, so in Kent. So yeah, so through kind of cobbling together these small jobs, I was able to kind of support myself. Surprisingly, in one of the most expensive cities in the world, in London, I try not to think about how I did it, because I wasn't making that much, and London is very expensive.
So I have one more question, and I want to give people a chance to ask you guys anything else. Can you guys say something about the college houses, the dorm system, which is, you know, similar and different than what we're accustomed to?
Well, in Leeds, we just all first years, or freshmen as you call them, everyone's guaranteed a place in halls. But then for like about 90% of like second years, third years, fourth years will move out into like private housing where they you know, with a landlord, and like they use like letting agents and that. And like that's what I'm doing next year. Like it's just a private house, like 15 minutes walk from the university. And usually a lot of people do that because A, it's cheaper, and B, you have more freedom. I mean, you can live in dorms again if you want, but it's quite rare.
How about at Cambridge?
So again, Cambridge has its own system with the colleges. So you have about 20 or 30 colleges in Cambridge University. You have to be affiliated to a college if you are being accepted at Cambridge, and then they provide lodging, they provide food. You pay for that, of course, but so you would also have for at least 1 or 2 years a room guaranteed in the college. Then people do also look for other houses of their own, and then it's different from your experience with what people do rent to students. And yeah, so the college is quite small, and then there is a sense of community. Everybody belonging to the college somehow feel that they're together. They really have a big sense of community, and then they help you in everyday life. They help you for everything. You have
What
to
do you
pay
mean they
college
help you
fee.
for everything?
Well,
I have a friend at Oxford. It's like exactly the same. Like he lives in the college now for the rest of his degree, and he has like all these amenities. And, like, he has people coming in to clean his room and that.
Those kind of things.
And that's specific to Oxford and Cambridge as opposed to any other university?
Yeah, I would say that's like kind of the big difference between them.
And is their academics are somehow integrated into that college?
Yes. Yes, so it's not that they're gonna select students from one specific field. They're trying to mix people, but it's an important part of the college life as well, the academic results, and I'm gonna accept you if you with an average academic background. So being part of a college, so Trinity or King's or St. John's, that tells that you're very good in a way, because they already accepted you. So there are some standing between the colleges. So I just want to add that college fees add up to that, to the university fees, but it's not as bad because there are a lot of funding opportunities available through colleges, through other funds available. It's quite obscure. If you don't know them, it's hard to find them, but and you have to ask somebody who has no idea about that.
Okay. All right, so what questions do you all have? What do you want to know?
I was wondering about cumulative exams for PhD programs. So I know in the United States we have, if you're doing a PhD program, you need to do your lit review, and then you need 5 or something, I guess just tests within your specific field that you're going to take. Is that something that's part of the UK education?
No,
Yeah,
my experience.
and definitely in the
No.
social sciences, and even here in the social sciences, I mean, usually you have a qualifying exams, which is basically an essay.
Mm-hmm.
You answer certain questions. But yeah, definitely not in the UK, there are no exams.
Okay.
It's writing. And I don't know with mathematics
Yeah,
what
it's the
you
same.
have
It's
to-
research work. You're just
Yeah.
judge on the final dissertation.
Yeah.
Nothing else.
Cool.
The courses are supposed to be something that you've taken before.
At the bachelor's level?
Yeah, bachelor and master's.
So as faculty, actually I do have one more question. How do you feel like your British degrees are viewed back here? Is it something that you think was a net positive? And Simon, maybe this is less applicable for you, coming with a Cambridge degree, which has such an international reputation. But do you feel like it's a net positive or a net hindrance in the job search, and how do people view a British degree in academia?
Well, this is the only job I've had post PhD, so it worked out for me. But I mean, I guess the only way I can say is that I'm so glad that I have a British degree, and I definitely consider myself a British sociologist, which is significant when you talk about American sociology. It's significant that I say I'm a British sociologist. So I'm like really glad that I learned in the UK that my kind of intellectual, I can trace my scholarly heritage back to British sociology. I think it's been a hindrance only within my specific field because American sociologists have a certain way of doing things and writing and so basically in terms of like publishing in certain journals, I just have to be more careful where I send my publications. But I know where to send my publications to get published. So I personally have not found it to be a hindrance.
Do you have any thoughts about having an international degree versus and working in the U.S.?
Well, Cambridge degree is always a plus, it has helped me, but an international degree, and I also have a degree in France, I think it's always helpful. It's diversify your views, and you learn how other people think, and then you're more rich for that, because in the end, having been in France, in England, and in the US, I've got much more resources than somebody who has just been in one place and has the same kind of resources all the time. So I would definitely advise you to do it if you can. That was a question, I think.
Yeah, I have another question about being a PhD student in the UK, and so obviously you don't take any formal classes, but is there anything built into the program where you present your research to your peers? Because I'm from Germany originally, and that's how it works in that setting, is that it's the same thing. You do your research on your own, but then they have these bi-weekly colloquia where you talk to other PhD students who are vaguely in the same field but not in the same research group, and that way you have some feedback, and it's facilitated by a faculty mentor. Anything like that in the UK?
Well, again, my personal experience, we were a group that was very small, and I think it was 8 of us, and on the same floor, we saw each other all the time. There was a weekly seminar, a research seminar, so they ask you probably once a year to present your results, and then the proximity of your advisor, he basically knows what you're doing, and then the requirement to see what are your progress. Ideally, they would like you to publish 2 or 3 papers, and then if you don't, this is the assessment. And yeah, conferences and stuff. You have the possibility the financial possibility. They would help you for that, to go to conferences and present your work somewhere.
In the case of, it may be specific to universities and to program, fields. In my experience, my fellow PhD students, we basically started a writing group to share work, which didn't really take off that well. But we did try. And then the only thing that was kind of built into the system in my department was every year there was a graduate or postgraduate conference in Bournemouth that our department would pay for every PhD student to go down to. And then of course, like, it depended on your advisor. If your advisor had brought you in with grant money, with research money, they would have money set aside or available for you to go and present at conferences. So that was kind of how I connected and shared my work with other PhD students and heard other papers from other students. There was one other opportunity that I took advantage of that was, I can't remember what it was, but there are these kind of special like workshops. It was like a weekend workshop in Portsmouth, I think. It's been a few years though, so I can't quite remember all the details, but it was basically, it was kind of like research methods for PhD students. And these students came from all over the UK, and you had to apply for it and everything. So there are kind of those opportunities. And it really, it's probably also depends on field. They might have things built in.
Other questions? Yeah.
I know it depends on like which part you guys study in, but what about safety generally on campus?
Yeah, I mean, like different cities have got more kind of notoriety, I'd say, in terms of crime, but I'd probably say probably London is probably the worst, but like I say, it depends where you are. Like there's always bad parts of the city, like there's parts of Leeds which people say, oh, don't go there at night, like kind of like Philly, so. Oh, except for we don't get notifications when everyone gets mugged, so that's the one difference.
That only extends for a few blocks.
Yeah, but no, unfortunately I have known people who have got mugged or stuff like that. So yeah, I'd say, and they live like everywhere. Like so, I mean, it's there's a case in Scotland, in London, in Leeds. So I think it doesn't really matter. I wouldn't say like any areas are particularly bad, unless you're like kind of not kind of in the city centre, but kind of on the outside of the city centre. I'd say that's probably where the worst crime is, but usually should be fine.
I would say that right before I was getting ready to go, that's when all the news was coming out with all the riots that they were having. London, Birmingham, Manchester, all over the place. So everyone's like, "Hold up, aren't you going to Birmingham?" But by the time I got there, everything had been settled. But what I would say is, you just want to make sure, like coming from University of Philadelphia, walking around here, you pick up, street sense. You just have to be smart about, what you do. At no point did I feel uncomfortable when I was in Birmingham. I mean, just by comparison, the crime is way less, than what I'm used to. But with that being said, you still have to, just practice common sense. Walk around with, friends. Don't go to certain, areas by yourself, in the middle of the night. But I would say I always felt safe when I was over there.
I would kind of add to that in the fact that there's literally street sense. Like all cities here are all grid planned. That's not the case in England. I know friends from the US who always tell me they get lost. So yeah, it helps to know your surroundings a little bit. Don't go down this alley or whatever. But yeah.
I've always found coming from Philly that the places people say are really dangerous, you get there and you're like, oh,
yeah,
whatever. Doesn't feel any different than home. Other things?
I have a question for the audience. Are the people in the audience, are they currently applying for study abroad programs or fellowships or anything, or just here kind of as an informational tool? Curiosity.
Information.
I'm just in the grad school, so.
So Jeff, did you, not to put you on the spot or anything, but I'm going to anyway. Did you sense any difference in how racial issues are handled when you were there?
Not not really. Birmingham is a very diverse city, you know, like Philadelphia. So you have people from all over the world, you know, in the city that I was in. And when I was in London, you know, that's even more diverse. So I know when I came over there, you know, they had just went through the whole riot issue, so that brought up the question of race. But my own personal experience, I didn't really, you know, I never felt uncomfortable or anything like that. I didn't feel any negative impacts with regard to race or anything like that.
All right. So do you guys have anything else that you want to add before we wrap up? If nobody else has questions, anything I should have asked you about your experiences?
I would say if you're going to go abroad, just go with an open mind. Definitely go with an open mind. Be ready and willing to try, you know, new things and different things. That's the reason for going somewhere else, you know, to just learn from them. It's a mutual exchange of ideas, you know, cultures and concepts. So definitely go with an open mind. And what I would do, I know when, you know, I had my experience, I kept a journal. I kept a journal actually for the study abroad office. And that was very helpful because it helped me think through my experience. You know, it helped me think through my experience, and it also helped me, you know, as I look back, it helped me, you know, remember the things that I did. So I would definitely recommend doing something like that, having a practice of like keeping a journal. But definitely.
No.
Sorry?
Yeah, I'm just moving. So what you're
Are
saying.
you keeping a journal now?
Yeah.
Okay.
And also, what I'd also say is that, well, for me, I don't know if you felt the same, but I thought coming to the US, I thought it'd be like exactly the same, except for people spoke differently. Like, I mean, the same language and everything. I thought it was like the same culture and everything, but it's not true.
No.
It's more different than I realised. And I don't know if you felt the same way, all of you three.
Yeah.
No,
You
I
don't
agree.
speak the same English.
Yeah, I found that more and more.
Which is
somebody,
great, yeah.
yeah, somebody will say something here, and I just what?
Yeah. Yeah, I want to reiterate what Jeff said, you know, try, you know, if you're going to do this, try everything. Like, I remember when I moved over, I decided that I was just going to do everything that I possibly could, you know, so I would write letters to the Guardian, I entered like these contests, and like I just decided to like just try everything. And one of the contests I entered and got into was these self-portraiture contests that I actually had a piece in the National Portraiture Gallery.
Wow.
It was like this national competition, and so yes, I highly recommend. And I would have never done that in the US. I would have been like, whatever. But I decided that, oh, since I'm, you know, I'm gonna make the most of my time here, and so yeah, I would recommend trying everything.
Yeah.
Definitely talk to Study Abroad if you haven't already. Haji Schreckler's back there. If you don't know Haji and you're thinking about going overseas, either as an undergraduate or a graduate, you should talk to Study Abroad. All right. Thank you all very much. I appreciate you coming and sharing your thoughts.